Hello and welcome into Conversations with Success. I am your host, Eric Collins, and this is episode number 30. Today we're going to be talking with Coach Milt Travis, former basketball coach at Model High School, Rome High School, and various other schools around the state of Georgia. But today we're specifically going to be talking about the Coach's Mindset Clinic. It's going to be taking place on November 7th, 2020 here in Rome, Georgia. And so I'm going to go ahead without further ado and invite Coach Travis into the conversation. Coach Milt Travis, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Eric. It's great to see you.
Great to see you as well. And you're doing something that's so awesome and something that is so needed at this time. And it's called the Coach's Mindset Clinic. Am I correct?
That's right. It's a name we've wrestled with, but we have settled on it again for the second year in a row, and it's something that typifies what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's good. And let me ask you this. What has brought about the Coach's Mindset Clinic? What brought about you starting this and using this as a platform?
We decided several years ago, after some interaction with mental health conditions of multiple coaches, athletes, and myself, that there needed to be an increased awareness in our society of how to deal with this. And there's a lot to unpack in this topic. And we decided the best way to get it out there was not just individually, but also if we could bring a speaker in that was knowledgeable, somebody that could present the topic well and give you a basic education so that you could understand yourself better and understand others better. It's amazing what it does for you and the understanding of other people.
Yes, I love it. Yeah. And am I correct in saying that you all did this last year at Model High School, right?
We did. We're sponsored by Fellowship of Christian Athletes, Kent Howard. They've underwritten us for this, and we bring last year we had two speakers. This time we have one keynote speaker. He was here last year, and we did it at Model High School. And this year it'll be at First Presbyterian, and on November the 7th, and we're excited about it. It's a great opportunity for people to just learn a lot about their own minds.
Yeah, and one of the things that I really want to dive into with you is the fact of mental health, right? And for me personally, there's always I've always heard there's always a stigma about mental health, and I love the way that you break it down, the mental health aspect of just the health, being healthy mentally, and it's not necessarily an illness, but it's just health related. Would you mind going into that and breaking it down like you've done for me so many times?
Yeah, and I want to preface everything by saying I'm not the expert. Right. I'm a facilitator. I'm a connector. I wish I had more training. That's what our speaker's here to do, to speak to it specifically. There's a great deal out there. Much of it is true. There might be some false stuff online that you can read about, but mental health is in everybody, and mental illness is not. We hear that somebody has a mental health problem, we immediately put a stigma on it, a taboo on it, like it's mental illness. And even mental illness can be dealt with and many times make you have a functional life if dealt with appropriately. So we don't want people that have mental illness or mental problems along the way to be categorized or have a stigma about them. Today we have more and more athletes. Recently Dak Prescott spoke out about having a mental health concern during the beginning of COVID, the loss of people in his life that he loved a great deal. And he was patted on the back for it, which was a great thing for me to hear, because we need to have people stand up and say, I have a bump in the road mentally, and I need help, I need support, because that's one of the things you have to control, the support. So mental health, everybody has. Mental illness is just a part of mental health. And so putting it in that perspective, but it's also a part of total health. Mental health is just one aspect that's built into physical health, social health, and for many people, spiritual health. So it can be four-sided, or it can be a triangle of the three, with the spiritual health being a part of the mental health.
Right. I love that. And you mentioned Dak Prescott, and that was so neat how he came out and said that, because he had been through some trying times. I think the death of his brother and some other things that have going on in his life. And like you said, that mental bump, or the bump in the road, as you said, stated previously. And with that, a lot of us go through that. And so with your experience in this capacity and dealing with people on an everyday basis, what are some ways to help signal that we may need to reach out for potential help?
That's a great question, and you'll hear that a lot when you're involved in these things. That's a great question, but it is, because I don't think that there's necessarily a one moment thing. You could overreact. I want to say it's always better to overreact than it is to underreact. It would always be better for someone to get upset at you for caring too much than it would be not caring enough. I think when people are out of sorts, it could be just a bad day. It could be a mental health issue that has caused us the bad day. It could be an ongoing mental health problem. As one coaching friend I have says this, there are layers to this that are incredibly numerous, because there are certain levels of this where you might still not be considered mentally ill, but you're still dealing with mental health issues.
Yeah.
So the awareness is a key in the fact when you see somebody out of sorts, starting to try to listen and understand more. And I think that's where it begins, is seeking to understand.
Yeah,
There's an old saying that says, seek not to be understood, but to understand.
Right.
It's caused me in the last 8 years to try to understand more so than ever. And I'm still not good at it. I need to listen better.
I think, and I agree with you, I think that's key, listening to people and trying to understand them. Listening with the intent to understand what's going on and getting to the root cause is so vital in this day and time. And being a coach in the profession for over 38 years, correct?
Yes.
Looking back now, have you seen like any mental health issues that may have come up with players or anything of that nature? From your past experience, looking back now, how would you have dealt with that differently today?
It's not just what I've learned in the last 8 years. I started teaching health probably 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And in that health course, there's a mental health part that speaks to Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
And Maslow was an American psychologist, and you'll find him referenced many times when we do things such as school programs or try to meet people's needs. Maslow had a pyramid that was designed to say that the most basic needs need to be met first before you can expect the higher needs to be met. And his most basic needs were food, clothing, and shelter. Yeah. And if you think about it, that's the basic needs of people in society. And our school systems will try to reach out to families and help them do that. Churches do that. Other organizations do that. But the next level is a need to belong, a need to be loved, a need to be part of something. Those are the next two levels, really. And in that, I started realizing that athletics was a part of belonging to something.
Yeah.
And if I could build a refuge within the athletic world of them belonging to something that was bigger than them, then we were accomplishing Maslow's needs,
right,
which I saw and understood to mean that the child felt better about themselves. So the old team concept where you had to go through the initiation, which I did when I was a young man, and you had to tough it out, I kind of fought against, because I felt like that we needed to embrace the teammate to begin with. He didn't have to be initiated.
Right.
He had to be respected like a family member. He had to be part of that. I wish now that I had had more understanding of that, even more so early on, because there were teammates I probably could have spent more time with. Yeah. I've always been a relationship guy, and selfishly so, because I feed off of that. Like knowing you is a good thing for me. It's not just to help you, it's selfishly good for me. So I found out with my players that I needed my players, and I would be told they needed me as for guidance or mentoring or basketball, but I needed them in my life too. I was part of something also.
Right.
So Maslow's hierarchy of needs, his triangle of needs, was being met in my life. So looking back, there's probably numerous times when I could have been more understanding.
Yeah.
But that's not so much that, hey, I flipped a switch and it changed. It's that I grew into that thought process before I even became a mental health awareness guy 8 years ago.
That's good. And I love the fact that you said growing into it and developing that mindset, if you will, which is key of what you're doing with this platform, right? Yeah. With the Coach's Mindset Clinic. And I know for me personally, being an athlete and playing against you and on those teams, being a basketball player, I always had a measuring stick of Michael Jordan, right?
Yes.
That was my guy. I wanted to be just as good as him, or what is he doing to become great? And then I also had another measuring stick of some of the players that were my teammates, that were on my team. Yeah. And so I would be comparing myself to them. And you and I have had a conversation previously about, measuring ourselves based on certain measuring sticks. So would you speak into how the anxiety of feeling the pressure or trying to be great or trying to be good or be better than someone else or comparing yourself to somebody else, how that affects your mental state?
We, as coaches, we like to embrace certain things that we created, and we like to put our name on them and think that we made it. And we don't. There's things I did right in coaching that I didn't know I was doing right. Maybe I picked it up from a mentor, and I saw it as something right. Maybe sometimes it was just what I felt like was good. But one thing early on I recognized was the yardstick that young men measured themselves by, and young people in general, maybe even adults, is not a proper yardstick when we look at the world's eyes. I love Michael Jordan. He is, to me, the greatest player of all time. But to think that I should measure every player by Michael Jordan would be a bad yardstick. It would be the wrong ruler. And so even in health class, I started teaching what do you measure yourself by? What yardstick do you measure yourself by? And I started asking players that, because if they all think they're Michael Jordan, they're going to fall short. And that's true with us in our lives as we succeed. We put ourselves out there as the perfect father, the perfect coach, the perfect brother, sister, husband, whatever. We're going to fall short, and so we have to be careful about the yardstick. So we started laying out, one of my assistant coaches years ago told me he had been on a very successful West Rome football team, and he talked about the aspirations in the locker room of winning. And he came into our program when we didn't have the chance to be as successful. We were trying to do some of those same success things. And we said our measuring stick was you playing extremely hard, you having fun, and you becoming better every day. Yeah. That was your measuring stick. And so we drew our measurement to those aspects. Yeah. Are you playing hard, Eric? Eric, are you having a good time? Eric, are you becoming better every day? And if you didn't answer those three the right way or correctly, then you need to change that, or you need to help us understand how to change that for you. Right. Or, maybe you didn't need to be part of the program, but the idea was if you measured yourself according to those, that was a self-measurement according to your own yardstick, not according to the yardstick of the world. You can include the measurements of the world, but to not get so lost in that, that's true about everything mentally, that we have to be careful about what we're listening to and that yardstick.
Yeah, I love that. And the key, I think, for me, and hearing what you just said, is having your own measuring stick to measure yourself by. And with that, what are some ways that you measure yourself now?
Well, man, that's a whole podcast in itself, and we can, and you and I do have great conversations. I appreciate you listening to me sometimes, but I think that a few things I've done for myself that have been good. Years ago, I heard a minister named Ken Smith. Yeah. He was a team chaplain at Miami, University of Miami, and also at Florida State. He's still active, and Ken Smith talked about having a mission statement in life, praying and coming up with what you thought your mission statement should be. Now, the question is how much you should follow that is very difficult, because I have had a mission statement in life, like to be a better father, to be a better family man, to be a stronger believer in the Lord, to physically put my body into a position to be in better shape. Right. And then all of a sudden something outside that mission statement comes up, and then you have to decide whether you want to live by that or not, because you may be called on to do something different. And I had that happen one time. I had this 8-point mission statement. I was following it. I thought it was awesome. And then all of a sudden, a job opportunity came up outside of it, and my wife looked at me and said, "Is that part of your mission statement?" And it wasn't, but it was what I was supposed to do. Wow. So it goes back to your measuring stick, what you listen to again. Just this morning, I went to a person about what we're doing today, a person who had built their own business, and said, "Give me some guidelines. Give me what you think I ought to be thinking as I enter this conversation today, because my measuring sticks, I wanted more." And I think it's fluid. It's always moving. I think young people have got to be encouraged to always be looking at themselves, but also go back to some basics that they can live up to.
Yeah, that's really good. And I love what you said about following your own measuring stick. And again, what are you listening to? Yeah.
That's almost another topic.
Yeah.
But it's part of that. Yeah.
Yeah. And for me, I'm really big on what I read, what I'm looking at, what I'm listening to. And so for you to say that, and I didn't know it was part of my mental health. Yeah. But listening to you, being intentional, I think that's the word I'm looking for. Intentionality and being intentional. And you said something key. You said something about the kids today. Because I think a lot of kids today, they look at our LeBron James. Nothing wrong with that.
Great player.
Yeah, great player. But they look at them and they measure themselves by that, or the crossover, or am I doing the Euro step right, or whatever the case may be. And they measure themselves with that. But as a coach, how do you tell a kid that's looking at that as their measuring stick, how do you tell them to get better without them coming so hard down on themselves so hard if they're not getting it right or to perfection?
That's very much part of personality too. Yeah. And many times when a young person gets to you, they're already developed some of that perfectionist attitude or not perfectionist attitude. And you have to weave your way through that and go through the layers of that. I asked that question you mentioned a minute ago about who are you listening to or what are you listening to, because it's part of that yardstick.
That's good.
I find myself when I'm listening to the wrong voices in life, whether it be by what I read, by what I hear online, or hear like music or in spoken word, or by just who I see and interact with, I find myself not being the person I want to be. So who I'm listening to needs to match up with what my mission thoughts are.
Yeah.
And like today, I don't operate with a 8-point mission statement. I might need to go back to that. I just said recently I need to write down more things.
Right.
And that was part of the conversation this morning about writing down your dreams. And that goes back to who you're listening to.
Yeah.
Are you listening to the people that get you where you want to be? But sometimes you don't even know where you want to be, especially a young person.
Yeah.
Why should a young person at 14 have to know where he wants to be?
That's good.
And even as adults, I say today at 63, I hope that when I grow up, I'll become this, you know. So I have to constantly check what voices I'm hearing.
Yeah.
And it's funny, you'll even say the same things that the people that you listen to say.
Right.
And you'll find yourself, even at my age, saying the same words or the same sentences. And sometimes you don't wish you weren't. Sometimes you wish you were, you know.
Right.
And, but being very intentional is very important and all that. And that goes back into the mental health.
Right.
It feeds yourself. It goes back to a conversation you and I had before about feeding the heart.
That's right.
I believe that we have to feed our heart. And that's one of the points I want to make today is what do you do for yourself to help your mental health? So,
that's good. I like that. And I think that's so key is being intentional on what you're doing to feed your heart. Yeah. And what you're listening to is a part of feeding your heart and what you're watching and seeing as well. And who's in your ear, right? And I love one of the things you just said is fluid. It's fluid. Everything is fluid. And being able to, would this be correct in saying adapting and adjusting? Yeah,
that might be the best way of saying it. It's probably the word I used before. I think I told you or somebody recently, fluid was one of my new words. So I like using that word.
Yeah.
But yes, adapting and adjusting.
Yeah.
And that's where the mental health thing can throw you off balance because I was very adaptable.
Yeah.
I was a guy that could get knocked down and get back up. I was a guy I always said you could throw rocks off my head and I would be okay.
Yeah.
And then when I hit the mental health obstacle in my life, at one point in my life, I started understanding myself even more mentally. Right. And that's what awareness is about, is what can you do to keep yourself in a good mental state, but also what can you do when you get there, you know, in a point where you don't want to be.
Right.
And then you could even have the part of where the mental illness part may attack you. And so there are, again, so many layers, and that's what our speaker is going to come talk about.
That's really good. And you reminded me of something a mentor told me a long time ago when I was dealing with a situation about a job. Yeah. And he said, Eric, it's fluid. It's not a block of ice where it's frozen. Yeah. But think of what you're dealing with as flowing water. Yeah. And it's flowing, and it's moving through this channel or moving through that channel, and it's going to end up where you want it to be. But you have to be intentional about as you're guiding yourself.
That might be a great topic for in your business, and maybe what I do as an interventionist to hang on to, because so many kids look at failure or success.
Yes.
It's like it's hard and fast.
Right.
And that goes back again to where we're at mentally. That it's not hard and fast. It is fluid, and it is adaptable, and that's what makes us who we are. Yeah. I'm a compilation of many years. Yeah. And there's a lot of thoughts behind that, but. You know, because if I had to be who I was when I was 17, that's kind of scary. Or who I had to be when I was 35 or even wherever. Yeah. And that's the part about mental health that's very interesting. What I learned in this whole process was that there is an ever-changing balance in our bodies that continues till the day we die. Yeah. So you may find an elderly person that deals with a chemical imbalance or a mental health shift just because of a change in their lifestyle, a change of many things. So it's not a thing that stops at 45 or stops at 30 or stops when you're raising kids or you retire. Right. It's an ongoing process of helping ourselves. Yeah, and I love what you said to me in a previous conversation, looking at mental health from an aspect of physical health. Yeah. Right? And if you want to stay healthy, you hit the gym or you make certain adjustments to your diet or whatever the case may be. And I think the same thing is true for our mental health as well. Would you agree? Oh, tremendously. I'm going to give you a simple example. It's almost funny, but if I were to drink a diet drink before I walked in here, I would not function at as high a level. Okay. So nutritionally, I know that either something in that diet drink throws me off, and I may not operate as a high functioning level. Mm-hmm. Nutritionally, we can be affected by what we take in. Yeah. One of the things they have you do when you go in for help on your mental health, they'll have you study your diet. They'll ask you to refrain from too much sugar. That was one thing I encountered. The first thing they always ask is, how's your sleep? There are so many things, and I'm going to give you a list here in just a second, but there are so many things that we can control today, even without seeing a counselor, but things that a counselor is going to grab hold of too.
Right.
And we probably all could use a counselor in life, to be quite true, and my friends become that. But we need to help ourselves.
Yes.
So, and that's a big statement right there. A friend of mine said that went through a mental health imbalance, said what counselors and medication and further reaching things that we may embrace do is help ourselves help ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's good.
Yeah.
Help ourselves help ourselves.
Yes.
That's neat.
Yeah.
And that's so needed today, is being able to help ourselves. And so as we continue with our conversation, what with the coach's mental clinic, mindset clinic, yes.
Coach's mindset clinic.
Coach's mindset clinic. Thank you. With that, who's going to be our speaker? Who's going to be your speaker?
Doug Duke. He's a licensed psychologist, family psychologist.
Yeah.
He operates a private business on the northeastern side of the state. He's worked with Georgia's football team when Coach Rick was there. He's become a friend of mine. He's who I've taken several people to, either via Zoom, in person. He gets them started back in the right direction. He's going to bring it together and tie us all in on the mental, physical, spiritual, social aspect and how they are interrelated. He's going to talk about where you go if you need help, and we want to touch briefly on that before we get off here. But he's a go-to guy for me.
Okay.
The question is who are the other go-to people? I had a conversation again this morning with a person who's going to connect me to a go-to person later on today in this area. I met somebody recently in the northwestern corner, and we need counselors. We need people that are support people that can give us direction and help us. And we need people to understand that when we're down, whether it be the kid who just got cut from the team or the kid who's struggling as a player, or the mother that's struggling as a mother, or the dad, we need people to go to like me and you who will listen and understand and make them understand they're not alone. But then we need next level people that if they need that help, we can get them to those people too, and it becomes a big part of it. There's kind of a network that takes off that's not talked about because of the stigma again.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we have functioning people out there that are mentally off balance a little bit that you wouldn't think they were, I wouldn't think they were, and they just need a little bit of support here or there, and they're not mentally ill. They're mentally off balance.
So true.
Yeah, so we can make the world a better place.
Yeah.
And it begins with feeding the heart. It begins with love for each other, the kindness aspects, the many things we hear about today.
Yeah.
And so there's a whole lot there.
Yeah, it really is. And we could go on a whole nother 30 minutes with that. And one of the things that you just said, having a go-to person, right? And as a coach, you had a go-to play or a go-to player, correct? And it's so important to have, because that's something that gives you some certainty, that gives you something that, a resource, if you will, that can help you get over that hump.
I think we all, and I have a tough guy pride to me. I grew up in the era where, you got knocked down, you got back up. And I made my children tough it out at times.
Right.
Sometimes if there was anybody I wish I could go back to and embrace a greater would be my children, to say, hey, I understand, I want to listen to you better. And I'm going to share a story with you in just a second about my daughter that she's allowed me to share. But the go-to people, like I've had numerous go-to people in my life, like mentors. And what's funny at my age now, mentors are shrinking because they're passing on.
Yeah.
And I have become a mentor to some that I would never think it's a privilege to me because I wouldn't know I have the words to give them.
Right.
But I still have friends that, like when I was raising my children, there's a coach that was here at Model with me, Danny Wiseman. He was my go-to guy about my children. He and a guy named Knox Wilson. And I would bounce things off of them. Even if they didn't give answers, I could bounce it off of them. That was a mental health thing for me.
Right.
Now, that's simple. That is not being a tough guy, I can do this on my own, by gosh, I know what I'm doing. That's, hey, man, tell me where I'm failing my children. Tell me what I need to do to get my children past this certain point, because I was saying get back up. I wasn't listening to them sometimes.
Right.
And I needed those words. And your spouse can be that person. But then it goes deeper than that, a go-to person counseling. You and I were eating lunch recently, and a common friend walked up, and she mentioned that she had a counselor she still visited.
Right.
She didn't say I have a problem. She said I use a counselor.
That's right.
Just to help me. That's a go-to person.
That's right.
So I think that word is broad also.
Yeah, I do. And I love the fact that when you have a go-to play,
Yeah.
You want your team to execute, right?
Yeah.
And the execution of that, whether they score or not, it's just the fact that they've executed gives them the opportunity to score, right? A greater opportunity to score.
You know what? You just took off on a whole new direction, Coach. You know, young coaches will look at it as you have to score.
Yeah, right.
That's the measuring stick again, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You looked at it differently. You talked about an opportunity to score. So you've been in coaching now for a while here at Model, and so you're looking at it differently than some young coaches do, because if they don't score, they failed.
Right.
You're saying, hey, I led them there, and they didn't score, so hey, we're okay.
Right.
That's part of the mental health aspect too.
Right.
Again, there's a lot to unpack in all that, and I was dealing with this before. But again, my story is a unique one in itself, but it led me to the awareness of others' needs to be reinforced, to be helped, to be guided, to be loved, to say, hey, even in the last 2 weeks, I looked at a young man, a wrestler in the area, and said, hey, he said, I've got depression. I don't know if you knew that. I said, yes, I did. I didn't talk to you about it. I said, but you're not alone. Let me explain some things to you that I do know. And I told him, and he looked at me and said, thank you so much, because he wasn't by himself.
Right.
He wasn't walking around the hallway by himself. He had a go-to person, just in the older guy, who said, hey, I get it.
That's good.
You know, I get it. So
that's good.
And how you like being a wrestler, and your success is based on whether you get pinned or not.
Right.
I mean, you're by yourself. You can't blame it on a teammate.
That's right.
You're not hidden behind a helmet or, in a combination of 5-on-5.
That's right.
And so that kid was dealing with it in life. He was facing the same conditions he does on the mat in everyday life. Like I'm by myself.
Yeah, right.
So, and I want to back up and say he had a mother who was very understanding. So that was one of his go-to people.
Okay, awesome. Well, good. Speaking of go-to, as we come to a close, what are some resources that people could hear locally or even nationally for anybody that may be listening? What are some resources that you know of that you could share with others?
I think that that's where it gets really tough, and that's why this clinic's taking place. I think to begin with, and I'm going to give you a crash summary here, I think there are certain things that we can do for ourselves.
Yeah.
One is the sleep.
That's good.
Secondly is nutrition. A third one is exercise. A fourth one is having a support system around us. Let's say you can't govern those things. You're a child. You don't even know that those things exist. You're just surviving. You know, you want to help children with those things. But then it goes into things like understanding what you're listening to. You know, what yardstick you're measuring by. Do you need counseling? Then counselors may take you to a different route of just counseling or counseling and medication. Or a doctor may take you there. They have to sign off on that. So those are ways of helping yourself. You guide yourself through those things. And it's surprising, a college athlete 2 weeks ago, we had this conversation, this very same conversation. He's struggling, and I laid all those things out for him, and he asked me where God fit in, and I said, hey, there's a spiritual aspect. You know, one coach said to me, how can you survive this without a spiritual belief in what you hold true to? And I don't think that you can, and I think when you govern those things I just mentioned, and you put the spiritual aspect in there, then you're able to help yourself, and you're able to take yourself to certain levels of mental health. But then when you reach a level of imbalance, which could be triggered by many things, I got triggered by an imbalance 8 years ago due to a reaction to a medication. It could be a trauma in your life. It could be a body change hormonally. It could be a loss of a loved one, a bad accident. It could be war. It could be addiction to a medication. Mine was a simple steroid that they injected me for a respiratory infection that threw me completely off balance, and I experienced a great deal of anxiety. And so I started searching and grasping for answers. I still had some fight in me, but I was sliding really fast. And in that process, I came across the right people. I had the right doctor. I had the right friends. I had the right counselor, who is the guy coming in to speak, Doug Duke.
Right.
He was the counselor I ended up with. I had the right people.
Yeah.
And I'm so thankful today. I text them occasionally and say, hey, thanks for being there when I needed you. Right. Because I think there's a world out there to be saved and to be understood. So the resources are counselors, friends, being aware, doctors, those kind of people. Yeah. I did not want to be medicated because I felt like that was just a throw-off. I got educated, and then I did do medication. And it did make a tremendous difference. Okay. And I was able to come off of it. Some people live on it because it's the right thing to do. So when you ask me for resources, I think you start looking around before you get imbalanced. You may never suffer an imbalance. Right. You know, my doctor said to me, he said, hey, you think you're a tough guy, you're going to get back up. You think that, like, I've had a death threat in my life. I've had, I came from a broken home. I saw abuse. I thought those things, I can handle that. I can handle anything. I've handled losing before. I've won before as a coach. Yeah. I've handled people coming after my job. I thought, you can throw those rocks off my big old hard head and it's not going to affect me. But so we're at a point with resources that you ask a question that I'm still investigating.
Okay.
I'm looking for resources. Yeah. I'm looking there's some local groups, counseling groups, that are really good. There are probably some local ministers that are really good. Yeah. There's local professional people. Right. School counselors are a place to start for athletes because they will forward them to the right people. Right. Those people are in place with some counseling background, and sometimes they're great counselors, but sometimes they're there to be facilitators also, and it's up to them to decide. I bounce things off of school counselors all the time because I'm not sure that I'm qualified to know what they know, and they give me direction. And sometimes I move on with my own thoughts, a process of helping somebody. Never with the idea that I'm going to counsel them out of the problem, but I can be a support person.
Yeah, and which is why I think this is so great what you're doing with the Coaches Mindset Clinic. It's so great that this is going to be a resource, not only for this community, but I think it's going to go statewide and even bigger than that. And it's just something that's needed. I think it's filling a void and a solution for a lot of people, especially during this time of unrest and pandemic and everything that's going on in our nation. So kudos to you and your team for putting this together and building this platform to what it is now.
Well, thank you. And again, if you have time and you have the opportunity to come, I know you'll be here, but the people that are listening, Doug Duke, November the 7th, we haven't set the times, probably in the 9 o'clock neighborhood. It is free at the door, but we will ask for donations because there is a financial piece to this. Fellowship of Christian Athletes has done a tremendous job of underwriting us and finding us a venue. We're reaching out immediately to the Rome area, but we're branching out to where needed. We have a limitation of 100 people. We may not meet even anywhere near that. We only had 30 last year, but sometimes it's one of those things. It's like I told you earlier today. People don't think they need life insurance till it's time to have life insurance.
That's true.
People will not think they need mental health awareness till it's time to have it. But somebody in their life is going to be in need of a mental health aspect. I want to close and tell you this story. A few years ago, I got a call from my daughter, who I love tremendously, of course. She's a school teacher, very successful school teacher, a mother of two, and a wife of a banker, and she was in tears. And she said she had fallen apart, and she had left school, and she was standing in the parking lot. And my old way would have said, tough it out, suck it up, get back in there and do your job. There's a certain point to that we all know is right athletically. I wanted to learn to tough it out. But I knew from my mental health awareness that my daughter needed something else because something else had gone on in her life. And it was postpartum. She had dealt with a chemical change with postpartum. And I told this story before without using her name. She said, Dad, use my name, use my example. I said, I can't get to you for the next 2 hours because you're across the state. And that's my daughter. I want to embrace her. And, I want to take care of her, but I can't get to her. And so I said, we got to think of somebody who can get to you. Nate can get to you, which is her husband, and who can be a support person for you. She found people within her church immediately who got her in a situation where she felt comfortable, felt loved. She wasn't by herself, and she was able to navigate her way through that and come out stronger than ever. That's a success story, and we don't always get those. But that's a success story because she was willing, but also because I wasn't the support person that was saying tough it out. I was a support person saying, hey, we're going to come up with a plan, and we're going to work that plan in the next few minutes. And we did, and it worked. So if the only reason I had to experience what I did was to save my daughter that day, it was worth it. But there's a world full of other people that need me and you and everybody else and need her. So we want to be there for them. A great way to begin is come listen to Doug on the 7th.
I love it. I love it.
All right.
Thank you, Coach Travis, for being here. And
always good.
And this is a really good conversation, and I think we could continue to go on on and on. But some of the things that I'm taking away from today is, number one, having that support group and being intentional about having and finding those people that you can trust, that you may love, and that's going to help you over those tough humps.
Feed your heart.
Yeah, feed your heart. Yeah. It goes back to what you said before, feed the heart.
I think feeding the heart is such a broad term. We talked about making this grow the heart, growing the coach, feed the coach's heart. If we make our hearts mentally stronger, with love, with kindness, with respect, we'll find a much better world to live in. We'll find a better world to navigate. We'll find better teams. And there's a lot of guys playing for me that are probably sitting there going, gee, I wish he had a better heart when he was coaching me. But I think that the love aspect of a team is so important, and it provides its place in society. So
I agree.
thank you for spending this time with me.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Is there anything that you would like to leave anybody that's watching us or listening to us, something like seeds of success or mental miracle or anything you want to call it that would help them maybe on this day that they're listening?
Yeah, I think we touched on most of them. I think the big thing is if you truly value others, you have to value yourself.
That's good.
And if you're going to value others, you have to get beyond barriers. Yeah. You can't say that a barrier of anything restricts you, like where they live, how they act, how they treated me first. Yeah. You have to be open and be willing to understand. And we've covered all that. And I just think if you can grow your heart to be stronger and more right, for me it's spiritually, I find everything else falling into place. When I'm out of line, there's something not clicking in my mind and my heart, and I go back to what it is. When it was mentally imbalanced, it was getting those tools to help me help myself again. So that's it.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Good deal.
Thank you. Coach's Mindset Clinic, November 7th, 2020. At First Presbyterian Church, tentatively set for 9 a.m. Hope to see you there. Thank you all for listening today, and here's to your success.